May 15, 1873, Western Home Journal, Lawrence, Kansas. The Labette County Murders. 8 bodies found. The only correct account yet published. From the Independence Republican. On Monday last, a brother of the lately murdered Dr. York received intelligence that a family named Bender had left their claim near Big Hill Creek in Labette County, where they were running a little store for the purpose of supplying travelers with such refreshments as they might need while passing. Their departure was discovered by someone who passed noticing a calf which had been tied up had starved to death. A closer inspection showed that all were gone with what movables could be carried in a wagon. The neighbors concluded to look further into the matter and, having learned that a team had been abandoned at Thayer some 3 weeks before, some of them immediately proceeded to that point and identified the team as having belonged to Bender. They then concluded to fully search the premises, their suspicions being immediately aroused toward that family as being the cause of so many being missed in the neighborhood. Mr. Edward York, being notified, immediately proceeded to the ground and had not been there more than half an hour when, in passing over a dead furrow and a little garden patch which had been plowed over, his attention was attracted to a piece of subsoil on the surface. Looking more closely, he discovered a straight mark across the furrow where the ground was slightly sunken. By looking closely, he was able to trace the outlines of a grave. The end rod of a wagon was used to probe the ground inside the lines discovered. It was found that inside the lines, it was not difficult to thrust the rod in its full length, while outside these lines it would not penetrate deeper than the plowed ground without pressure. Digging was immediately commenced, and the body of Dr. William R. York was discovered. On its being uncovered, it was found that he had been killed by blows on the head with a blunt instrument, one on the back of the head at the base of the brain being sufficient to produce instant death. There were 2 others on either side of the head, and his throat was cut from ear to ear, and so deeply that the head was nearly severed from the body. 2 hammers and a hatchet were found on the premises, one of which fitted the wound on the back of the head. The premises were next visited and examined. The building is a frame 16 by 20, unplastered. The generally accepted theory of the manner of the killing is that travelers were seated in such a manner that their heads would lean against and indent the cloth partition which crossed the room. Someone stationed behind the curtain would then strike them with a hammer, and someone in the front room was ready to finish the job. After that, they were taken to the trapdoor, where they were thrown in, their throats cut, and they were left until night, when they were carried out and buried in the patch of ground above alluded to. The body of York was immediately recognized by Edward York by general features and by a bandage on one knee where he had a running sore and a bandage on one finger of his left hand, which had been mashed just before he started on his journey. L.W. Weed of this place also recognized the body as soon as he saw it. The body was brought to Independence on Wednesday, and that night it was consigned to its final resting place in Mount Hope Cemetery. The location of the place is in the northwest corner of Labette County, on the road to Osage Mission and Fort Scott, about 10 miles from Thayer and 5.5 miles from Cherryvale. The building is out of view from every other house and seems to have been chosen expressly for the murderous purposes for which it has been used. It is in a hollow or swale in the prairie, far from timber, and where they could see a mile in any direction and be in no danger of interruption for at least half an hour. There was a stone stable on the premises where horses could be securely hidden until such time as they could be run off and disposed of. After the finding of York, it was determined to make a further search the next day. This was done, and the horrible disclosure was made that there were at least 7 other graves on the same piece of ground. Willing hands were soon engaged at resurrecting them, and during Wednesday the bodies of 7 more victims were brought to light, all killed in the same way and disposed of in the same manner, with the exception of the little daughter of George W. Longcore, who showed no marks of violence, but is supposed to have been smothered or buried alive. George W. Longcore and daughter have been missing since the latter part of December, They had started to go to Iowa from the neighborhood of Onion Creek. Mr. Longcore was a neighbor of Dr. York and had purchased a wagon of the latter. He and his daughter were buried in the same grave, the daughter, 18 months old, being placed between its father's feet. The father was stripped of all clothing except his undergarments, as were all the victims, but the child was buried with all its clothing, even to a pair of mittens. The bodies were claimed by Mr. Longcore's father-in-law and taken away for interment. Mr. Brown was from Cedarvale in Howard County and had traded horses in the neighborhood of Ladore with a man named Johnson. He was recognized by a silver ring which he wore and which he had shown to Johnson. This ring he said he had found, and it contained some initials which we could not learn. He is supposed to have had it with him. W.F. McCroddy resided near Cedarvale in Howard County and was contesting a claim before the land office at Independence. He was on his way to Neosho County when he expected to get money to carry on his contest. He was not supposed to have had any money with him. Another report is that he had sold his claim, horses, and wagon, and, together with $1,400 sent him, to make his payments on his claim, was possessed of about $1,900. We are not inclined to credit this latter report. Henry F. McKenzie of Hamilton County, Indiana, has been missing since about the 5th of December last. He was on his road to Independence, where he was expecting to locate. He had little or no money. He had a sister in Independence, Mrs. J. Thompson, by whom his body was recognized. He was about 30 years of age. Mr. Thompson removed the remains for interment. Mr. Boyle was supposed to be another of the victims, but was not positively identified, although his wife, who was on the ground, was tolerably certain. He wore a homemade linen shirt, rather uncommon in this country, and his wife said that it was the kind of shirt her husband wore. He had been missing since December last and had started for Osage Mission. There is one body still unrecognized, and is so disfigured as to be hard to describe. He was of medium height, and appeared to be bald on both temples. About a mile from Bender's, there is another grocery kept by a man named Brockman, against whom suspicion is attached of complicity in the murders or of a knowledge of their having been committed. He is said to have been a partner of Bender's from 1869 to 1871. The people assembled were confident that he could make some disclosures if he would, and it seemed impossible that these crimes could be committed in such close proximity to him without his knowledge, as his family were in the habit of going to Bender's for milk, he having a fresh cow. It does not seem possible that one German family, on good terms with another, should not know of his absence for 3 weeks, when their claims were almost adjoining, and their houses less than a mile apart. The neighbors, believing this, and being determined to ferret the thing to the bottom, took Brockman from his house, conveyed him some 8 miles in the woods on Wednesday night, and there twice hung him to a limb until life was almost extinct, in order to force from him any knowledge of the matter he might possess. In this they were unsuccessful. Great excitement prevails throughout Labette and adjoining counties over this series of diabolical murders, and if anyone is captured, known to be connected with these murders, the courts will hardly be troubled with them. The Bender family must all be guilty, as it is not possible that any could be ignorant of what was going on. The house is located in the middle of the prairie. No farming was carried on to cause any to be absent from the house. The graves were all deep and dug in a systematic manner to a depth of about 5 feet. The surface of the soil was kept separate from the subsoil and preserved to cover the top. After the burials, the ground is carefully plowed and harrowed over. The 9th murder was that of a man named Jones, whose body was found in Drum Creek some time since. He was killed in the same manner as the others, and had been hauled to the creek in Bender's wagon, which was easy to track, as one wheel was dished and wobbled. He was thrust through a hole in the ice, the ground being frozen so as to prevent grave digging. The murders reported above are all of recent date, and the family having resided in the neighborhood for 4 years, it is probable that the half has not been told. A singular circumstance connected with the burials is that all the bodies were buried with the left arm crossed on the breast and the right arm lying by their side. This is supposed to be the sign of an organized band, and that when one member is arrested, the remainder find the money to defend the accused. Many rumors are afloat, among others, that the Bender family has been arrested, but these are premature, although it is expected that within a week the whole of them will be captured. The Benders consist of 4 persons: the old man, who is a stout, burly fellow with shaggy eyebrows, his wife, not particularly different from the average German woman of low degree, the son, who was a stout youth of some 22 years of age, and a daughter, aged about 20, who pretended to be a clairvoyant, fortune-teller, and spiritualist, and who seemed to possess complete control over the balance of the family. She was rather good-looking, with fair complexion, light eyes, and yellow hair. We have given what we know to be correct and have avoided everything not fully corroborated. We were on the ground and viewed the premises and remains with our own eyes, and conversed with those who were personally cognizant of what was related. The reader can supply his own ejaculations of horror.